Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Monday to a fresh edition of Futbol Americas. I'm Alexis Nunes alongside the Herculez Gomez, who put on a blazer for us today. And Jeff Carlisle is joining us live and in the flesh. So that means this is a tie. You don't have a tie, though. Jeff had to get suited and booted. That's why I also put on a dress for this, because it's a special edition of Futbol Americas now that we are about 100 days away from the FIFA World Cup right here in the USA, Canada, and Mexico. And our squad would not be complete without our favorite goalkeeper alongside Shaka Hislop. But Kasey Keller is joining us because we do have a lot to talk about. We've got 5 main groups of things to talk about, indeed, and we're going to get to them right now because we know that, of course, the USA, that's going to be our first area of focus right now. The U.S. men's national team, a lot of eyes on them. A lot of eyes will be on them, and we want to know exactly what their success bar should be for this World Cup, because we know that the USA has famously made the quarterfinals of a World Cup before. That kind of set the bar. Now this is a different format, an expanded World Cup. It is on home soil. We talk about how this should be the most talented squad of U.S. players that we have seen, more and more playing over Europe. So is it quarterfinals or bust for the USA, Herc?
Can we, for a second, talk about the expectations and how one gets there, how thin the margins are, how fine the lines are? Let's see. The 2 most recent that I could think of, the 2002 World Cup, and Kasey was part of this group, historical quarterfinal appearance, where they were a blown handball, Torsten Frings on the goal line, Greg Berhalter corner kick, away from being in a semifinal in our modern era. Kasey will tell you that World Cup, they went 1-1-1 in group play. The last game of group play lost by multiple goals to Poland, and were on their way home until South Korea backdoored the U.S. men's national team to the next round with a goal versus Portugal out of nowhere. They did what they did. Then you go to South Africa, Confederations Cup, Bob Bradley's 2-0 halftime lead that ends up going the other way, 3-2, finalist versus Brazil in the Confederations Cup. They lost the first 2 games and were backdoored through the format. They did what they needed to do, but the margins are so small here, so thin. 2 scenarios, 2 very likely scenarios, and if the U.S. wants the best scenario, they have to win the group. What I think is a highly contested group. A group where any one of those participants, and Turkey, if it is the playoff winner, will feel like they can win the group. If you win the group, most likely scenario, if everything goes to plan, is a 3rd place team that you should most likely get by. And in the round of 16, Belgium. And after you beat this version of Belgium, if you can do that, a quarterfinal appearance versus Spain. And that's the end of the road. That is really what it is. If all goes to plan, that would be a beautiful scenario if all goes to plan for the U.S. men's national team. And then you take your chance against Spain. Mauricio Pochettino wants his miracle on ice moment for the U.S. men's national team. That would be it versus Spain. But if you come second in this group, it's Argentina in the next round. So people realize how difficult things will be this World Cup. Look at Morocco last World Cup. They had the CONCACAF winner in Canada, a golden generation in Belgium, and a World Cup finalist in Croatia. After that, you had the likes of Portugal, Spain, France. And let's say they would have beaten France. You have to add another game to it because now there's another round. Another World Cup probably winning contender, or a team that can contend to win the World Cup. Quarterfinals, if they're lucky, is the end of the road, and that's got to be the bar.
Jeff, do you agree?
For the most part. I agree with her. It's going to depend so much on who they face in those knockout rounds. Obviously, they have to get there first. Because this is a tricky group, especially if Turkey is the team that comes through the playoff from Europe. So I do think the minimum expectation, absolute minimum, is getting out of the group and then getting to the round of 16. I mean, I think that's very doable. Actually, I think if they get knocked out in the round of 32, then it's going to be a disappointment, a blown opportunity, because this is just an amazing moment for U.S. soccer and for this team, because they have the opportunity to really captivate the nation and really drive the sport forward in a way that we haven't seen very many times. I mean, we were used to seeing it most every World Cup, and then 2018 came around, and the U.S. obviously didn't get there. But, it's a huge chance to really have these guys go down in U.S. soccer history as legends. And so you don't want to let that pass you by. And I think if they can get to the round of 16, again, if they end up facing a Belgium or an Argentina, there's not going to be any disgrace in that if they lose. So, I think, again, round of 16 is probably the most likely endpoint for them. But it's tournament football, so we'll have to see what happens.
It's tournament football indeed. Before I just go to Kasey on this one, of course, Herc just said, Jeff, that realistically the USA could set themselves up best by winning the group. Anything else, and you're already entering murky waters. So is winning the group, when you look at the opponents now, and we will see, of course, who the next one will be, this current crop of players?
It's a realistic ask, but it's one of those groups where on any given day, any team in that group can win. And the U.S. could win all 3 games. They could lose all 3 games. I mean, it's really that final line that they're having to walk. So, but yes, winning that group, that is going to make their lives so much easier and allow them to achieve their dream of really going deep in the tournament. But again, we'll have to see what happens.
All right, well, as Herc said, Kasey was part of that U.S. team that now has set that quarterfinal bar. We keep hearing about it. So, Kasey, as you would know, it has to be quarterfinals or bust for this squad, right?
I still feel that a lot of it just depends on who you play in the next round. I mean, first and foremost, win your games, get out of the group stage. That's first and foremost. That's what you have to do, particularly with the expanded field with 8 third-place finishers going through. But obviously, Herc made the point. If you finish lower in that, then it gets more and more complicated. The more, the higher you can finish, the easier your next round opponent's going to be. But let's go back to Qatar. We ended up playing the Dutch, the 32. Do you honestly think that the U.S. should have beat the Dutch in the round of 32? And I think that's the question mark, is that realistic? Who's the opponent, and is it realistic that we beat them? Do we want to have some great miracle on ice moment? Of course we do. We want to beat the Dutch. We want to beat the Spanish. We want to beat Argentina. Of course, but you still have to look at it from a realistic standpoint.
Considering the USA has already made it to the quarterfinals, Herc, and this is the thing, because of course
third place finish, by the way, the USA.
Yeah, well, we're talking about the modern era when all of us were at least born, Herc. Unless I don't know if anyone was born in the 1930s, so we're not going to count that one. Maybe our Stevie Nickel, but success. That is the word that we have up there on the topic bar. The US has already had a quarterfinal berth. So would it still feel like a success if they just repeat that this time around?
It would not feel like it, no, by no means, no. It would actually feel like
semi-final would make it a success.
Well, semi-final would make it a miracle, to be honest. And then, look, let's just call a spade here. Morocco had one of the craziest schedules you could ever imagine and made it to a semi-final. With this current format, throw another World Cup contender into that. Throw another team that could be a semi-finalist in any other format into that. It gets that much more difficult. But I am of the train of thought that if the U.S. men's national team was ever going to do anything of worth in a World Cup, certainly at home, in a World Cup with what many presume is the pool with the most talented players you've ever had, with a coach of a European pedigree and an investment made in this program, certainly this would be the moment. But what about this team and its past makes us feel that come Spain, they can deal with the Spain. This version of Spain. This Spain right now with their individual players, Lamine Yamal, who's going to wreak havoc on anyone, let alone this back line, which has shown trouble. Let alone these center backs, which have shown how long in the tooth they are. We may be asking too much. Is it a failure in terms of what we expected in this World Cup heading into it? Yes. But realistically, that could be the bar.
Now, Jeff, when we talk about teams and squads and the makeup of it, you always say that sometimes you can have the perfect squad that can run havoc in a league and win, but then sometimes you just need a good old tournament team. You just need a team that has that fight, has that grit, has that tooth. which, you know, Herc and Kasey have spoken about a lot, have questioned if they saw it in this current crop of U.S. Men's national team players. You look at that 2002 team or even the 2010 team, you know, they're the ones that kind of has set the bar of what success looks like for the U.S. at a World Cup. How would you compare this current crop of players to those two teams?
Well, I would say if you go individual by individual, yes, they are more talented, but that doesn't always make a great team or a successful team. And, you know, you look at those 2002 teams and the 2010 team, those teams were battle tested.
Yeah.
I mean, they had to go through qualifying. And not only that, but they had signature wins. I mean, I think about, you know, the Confederations Cup team that Herc alluded to earlier. They beat a Spain team that was unbeaten in 35 matches.
Yep.
And, you know, that's a result that will make you sit up and take notice.
With 3 major trophies behind them.
Right. And it's going to make everybody sit up and take notice. And so, you know, I haven't seen that kind of result from this group yet. I was certainly encouraged by some of the last few friendlies that they played. Paraguay, Uruguay especially, you know, certainly I was not expecting a 5-1 scoreline. But again, those are friendlies. As much as Mauricio Pochettino likes to say, well, we're not treating them as friendlies, we're treating them as competitive matches, understood. But you know, there wasn't really anything on the line in terms of progressing in a tournament or not progressing in a tournament. So I think that's one thing that the 2002 team had and the 2010 team had is they kind of had those signature wins. And you know, they came in very confident and not afraid of anyone. Not that I think that this team is going to be afraid of anyone, but it's just when you watch them, it's just kind of nagging in the back of your mind that, okay, what result can they point to say, yes, we belong in the same stage as these guys, and you can't find one. So, you know, I think that's a question mark, you know, heading into this particular World Cup is, you know, are these guys tested enough? And do they, you know, they have the ability, but when you get them together, do they have the cohesion? Do they have the teamwork to be able to get a result that's really going to surprise the world?
The last U.S. men's national team that had signature wins that weren't the worst Mexican team that I've seen in my lifetime was the 2014 cycle. Kasey was part of that. I was part of that. Talking about wins against Italy, wins against the Netherlands, wins in the Azteca against the Mexican national team. You know, in Europe, beating quality teams. Those are signature wins. You have to go back that far into the program to find them. I'm not talking about a made-up tournament in Colorado or in Dallas against the worst Mexican national team that I've seen in my lifetime. I'm talking about really doing something of worth, turning heads, as Jeff just mentioned here. That's how far you have to go back into the program. Now, this current pool, it's not their fault that Nations League ultimately killed the ability to find those opponents.
About you, because nobody knows that team, especially in 2002, better than you, and it's something that you've spoken about on this show time and time again, that you wanted to see more of that fight, more of that grit, which was something that was really synonymous to U.S. men's national team players. So how would you support, how would you compare that team, your team, with the one that we see now?
Well, I agree with Jeff that I think if you look at where the players are playing, I think individually, you got to look at this current team and just kind of go, okay, I expect, you know, good things from that group. But there's also a case, a very fine case, and I think Herc and Jeff made really good points that they're not playing. They haven't had to play 2 years of competitive matches. If you've ever played like a Honduras or an El Salvador or a Trinidad, you play them in a friendly, and then you play them in a World Cup qualifier in their country where if they win the match, you know their president's going to declare a national holiday. It is a completely different level of pressure and of commitment. And I think that is one of the worrying things I have. And I think that's why there will be maybe a safety valve of relying on more players that have had World Cup experience, that have had maybe some World Cup qualifying experience, and have had maybe more competitive European experience, because you haven't had these groups with the opportunity to go through and play 16 really difficult qualifying matches.
Can we just really quickly talk about the individual players heading into this World Cup? Because if we look at World Cup experience, World Cup moments, Christian Pulisic is going to go down as the best U.S. men's national team player of all time. talent, accolades at the club level, but he doesn't have the national team pedigree. And I say this respectfully. World Cup moments of a Landon Donovan, a Clint Dempsey, a Kasey Keller, Tim Howard. This group lacks really that type of moment at the biggest of stages. This group's biggest moment right now is a 1-1 draw versus England. That's their biggest moment. That is this group's biggest moment. So some of these players, like a Christian Pulisic, that it all hinges on the individual brilliance he can have, because that's what you're hoping for, isn't in the best moment individually right now, which makes you question what this team could look like come tournament time.
Jeff, you see it like that too? Absolutely.
You think about what these guys have done, and you can't always pick your path. I mean, you can only beat the team that's in front of you, as the old saying goes. But, I do think that this group of players still has something to prove. I mean, granted, that game against Iran, the final group stage match, they did come through in the clutch. Christian Pulisic came through in a big way and paid for it, if I remember rightly.
Gave up a testicle.
Yeah. But, so they have a moment where, they did stare down some pretty intense pressure.
Yeah.
But, I'm wanting more. I'm sure a lot of people are wanting more, and they want to see that big moment. They want to see almost that Algeria moment. Not so much thinking of the opponent, but just the moment and the pressure and the stakes involved. And, I still think this group has more to give, and I think along with a lot of other people, would like to see them come through and be able to provide that.
They have an opportunity to go down as national heroes. Case isn't going to let me lie. We have colleagues who still live off the 1994 World Cup.
Oh, yeah.
They're still making a name off the 1994 World Cup. Social media wasn't around back then. If Weston McKennie at Juventus, if Christian Pulisic at Milan, if Serginho Dest, who's played at Barcelona, if some of these players can put together a run, the country is going to get behind them, and they're going to experience a type of fame like they've never experienced before. They will be household names. They will live off this for the next 30 years. They will change the way the sport is viewed in this country, the same way that the 1994 crop changed the way that we view the sport in this country. Before that, there was no domestic league. Because of that, the investment was there, and it stayed there. This has monumental value not only for the country, for the sport, but for them as well.
The thirst is there indeed. And the thirst for our other show is there as well. ESPN FC, we are on 7 days a week. A new episode dropped today as the boys were reacting to Real Madrid's shock loss to Getafe in La Liga. Check it out on ESPN+. All right, now we're about to get into our second block for this one, and this has to do with Mauricio Pochettino and the pressure that the U.S. men's national team definitely will face as hosts of a World Cup. Now, we're going to start out with Pochettino because this was the big name signing. This was the big name coach that so many people felt the USA needed and deserved. And one of the conversations we've had over years now is what is the identity of this U.S. team? So now, 100 days out, Casey's laughing because I think everyone's still searching for the answer, but let me try to get the answer from you guys. Herc, I'll start with you on this one again. What is the identity now of this U.S. men's national team under Mauricio Pochettino, 100 days out from a World Cup?
Well, I think they have found an identity, if I'm being quite honest. And happy birthday to Mauricio Pochettino, whose birthday today.
Feliz cumple!
Feliz cumpleaños to Mauricio Pochettino. This team during Mauricio Pochettino, before Mauricio Pochettino, was soft. Okay? It was a team that if you got in their face, they backed down. It was a team that when the moment got great, they buckled. And somewhere along the lines, and I do feel it was the last 5-6 friendlies, that changed. The message changed. The culture changed. Somewhere along that summer, where Christian Pulisic, Yunus Musa don't show up, where the group is divided between the Gold Cup, Club World Cup, and those who aren't there, a line was drawn in the sand. And that line was, you're with this program or you're not.